What's up, hobby friends, and welcome to my video tutorial on how to paint the widgets from Atomic Mass Games Shatterpoint. I wanted a quick and easy color recipe that I could bang out in an afternoon, and I drew inspiration from the carbonite block that Han Solo is encased in The Empire Strikes Back. You'll see the colors I used up on the screen, so if you want to give the video a pause, you can copy those down, and we can dive right on in. So the approach to painting these widgets is going to be in a couple of phases. The first is in a bit of a dry brush / stippling technique where I go from the darkest colors and work my way progressively brighter and brighter with my highlights, followed by a highlight stage and then an enamel stage. So here you can see I'm starting with my rubber black and I'm applying my colors in a sort of broad stippling dry brush motion. My next color, working my way up, is ash gray. And as I'm working my way through the highlights, you can see that I'm really dotting and stippling my dry brush on the larger flat areas. I want to avoid dry brushing on these big flat surfaces because dry brushing tends to leave streaks, even when you're working in a circular motion, which we want to avoid. Stippling does take a lot longer, but I think the end result is a lot cleaner. With the dark shade gray, and as I work my way up brighter and brighter, I start to concentrate more of my highlights closer and closer into the center of the widget. This is a little bit more tedious on some of the larger widgets. I think the range 4 and 5 took quite a bit, but just take your time. Make sure that you're dry brushing to hide all of the repeated patterns from the brush. And when I go to my sea gray, I switch to a smaller dry brush for this. And the reason for this is because the patterning for the large one, I think, tends to be fairly noticeable. Plus, because I wanted to concentrate the highlights on a smaller area, especially on the size 2 and the 3 widgets, as well as the rotating movement widgets, the smaller dry brush gave me just a bit more accuracy. So here you can see that I'm applying my stippling in the center, concentrating the highlights closer and closer into that center portion of the widget. And then on the border, I do a little bit more dry brushing because the streaks aren't really as visible and I can catch the edges more quickly. My final highlight is going to be with APC Interior Light Green. Again, starting by concentrating this highlighting in the center, I'm using that short dabbing stippling motion. I'm basically stabbing at the surface. I'm keeping the pressure very, very light because I don't want to go too heavy-handed. You want to make sure that your application of paint is built up very slowly and progressively, and this way you can do a lot of very thin layers, very light layers, to create this sort of steady increasing density of color. From there, I'll take my APC Interior Light Green and I'll start to highlight all of the interior details. So anything with a hard edge will receive a very rough highlight, and then elements like the lightsabers, I will do a bit more of a rougher highlighting, or I guess exaggeration of the features. I try to keep the lighting on these elements fairly uniform, so it's not darker or brighter from any one angle. If anything, it's fairly uniformly lit. I'm just looking to really catch all of these raised surfaces and give it a bit more emphasis and a bit more punch. I don't think there's any reason to spend too much time being neat with the stage, largely because the enamels will help to define and blackline all of these recesses and creases. Next, we'll go to the enamel stage. I'm going to start with the panel liner for brown and green armor. This goes on fairly heavily because as it dries, it becomes very, very translucent. So I'm just going to go ahead and saturate the entire base. This is an enamel, so you want to make sure that you're using a synthetic brush for this and you're cleaning your brush with mineral spirits. You can use something like a contrast wash from Games Workshop. I think Agrax Earthshade is a very nice equivalent, but it does stain much more heavily, and you might want to use a lot more of the Lamian medium to help dilute the color. Next, I'll go in with AK's Rust Streaks, and I'm going to basically do the same thing as the previous step. I'm going to stain particularly a lot of the deeper corners and recesses, and then I'll go in with my brush and some clean mineral spirits, and I'll clean up the surfaces and pull some of the color out. I'm not going to be worried about creating my blends too smooth. I do want a bit more of a rough, patchy, grimy feel. So if the colors end up splotching or drying unevenly, I think that adds a lot of charm to the approach. Again, you can do this with acrylic-based washes. It just requires a bit more accuracy, but the trade-off is they're a lot easier to use. You can use water to clean your brushes, and you can dilute with something like a Lamian medium. And once the widgets are fully painted and you've given the enamels for like a fair few hours to dry, you want to make sure that you apply a varnish to protect them from handling and from gameplay. And then finally, to help lubricate the movement widgets, I'm going to be using a bit of vegetable oil. So I'm just going to spray this a bit on a napkin or paper towel. I'm going to get my Q-tip and I'm going to lubricate all of the surfaces that do contact each other. So on the top and inside ring of the bottom piece, and then on the corners of the top piece. And then we just clip the widgets together, and that's pretty much it. You want to make sure that you're not overdoing it with the vegetable oil, and try and keep that oil off of your fingers. Otherwise, it does get a little bit messy when you try and put the widgets together and you get it on the areas you don't want to be lubricated. The best thing about the vegetable oil is it's fairly easy to clean up. A bit of water, paper towel, you can wipe it down. And I find that it is non-reactive to paint. I did this exact same approach to my Marvel Crisis Protocol widgets about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and nothing untoward has happened since. And that's pretty much it. That wraps up this tutorial. Nice and quick. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it helps you to paint your widgets in a nice, quick, dirty manner, but still looks great and has that, again, carbonite feel. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe for more awesome weekly content. If you want to check out my other social media platforms, I'll make sure to have links in the video description below. As always, until next time, happy hobbying.